Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Michael Spath, and I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Center for Middle East Peace. We're a voice of conscience for peace, justice, human rights, and intercultural encounter. I want to remind you that today's interview with Mazin will be recorded, as was yesterday's webinar with the other two Nobel Peace Prize nominees from Palestine and Israel, Issa Amro and Jeff Halper. Both of the recordings will be posted on our Indiana Center for Middle East Peace YouTube channel in a couple of days. So today we're excited to be hosting and talking with our friend Mazin Qumsiyeh from Bethlehem of the Palestine Museum of Natural History and the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. And of course, as you know, Mazin has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by herself a Nobel laureate in 1996, Northern Ireland's Myrid Corrigan Maguire. Mazin, as always, it's a privilege and a pleasure to speak with you today. Welcome from Bethlehem.
Thank you very much for having me on this, and it's always good to be with you.
So Mazin, let's get right to it. As I mentioned, you were nominated by Myrid Maguire from Northern Ireland. What an honor to be nominated by someone who herself has not only been nominated, but awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, indeed. It's a great honor for me. Obviously, especially in Northern Ireland, as you know, the Troubles. She was very important in those aspects in peacemaking. And we think similar things to reconciliation, peace can exist here in Palestine if there's goodwill on the part of many people.
Did you know her?
Yes, for many, many years, over 25 years, I knew her.
Okay. So, and when you were you were recently in Ireland, did you get a chance to interact with her or meet with her? Or I know she's from Northern Ireland, but
yeah. No, I was in Belfast, and she arranged for me to come speak to her group, which is called the Peace People. And that's where she also sprung on me the idea of nominating me. I was very reluctant at first, and then I thought it might be good to draw attention to what's happening here in Palestine in the middle of the genocide and the ecocide.
Mazin, what or who would you say are your major influences, not only for your work in environmental justice, but also as in your role as an activist, part of the struggle for Palestinian liberation? You know, your major influences.
Well, obviously, as a Palestinian, the first influences are the people around you, the family, the village, in my case, the village of Beit Sahur, the Shepherd's Field. As you know, the Beit Sahur was mentioned by Issa Amro yesterday as even inspiring him, and he is from Hebron. During the uprising of 1987 to 1991, Beit Sahur had the lead in popular resistance, nonviolent resistance, as some people call it, but Beit Sahur engaged in tax revolt, engaged in activities like handing back their ID cards, like trying to break the economic siege on Beit Sahur, including with what you know was a very funny story about the cows that were fugitive cows because the Israeli military does not want us to have cows, so we smuggled 18 cows. Well, actually 17, one of them was pregnant, and so they became 18. But anyway, these cows were hidden by the people of the town, as the Israeli military says, we're not allowed to have cows. And so they started a military operation called Operation Hunt Cow. And so these people in my village are my primary influencers, my family, my friends, and my colleagues. in terms of the resistance. And then in terms of my environmental work, I would credit my mother who was taking us to the valleys to work on, to harvest some medicinal and herbal plants and even like snails for food. We were not very wealthy. We were poor. And so that mother and my uncle Sana, who was the first Palestinian biologist, used to take me with him to the fields. And this is where I learned to love nature, love animals and plants. And this is also love people, because like both my uncle and my mother cared much about the suffering people, especially the refugees who were here living in caves in some places and in the open in other situations as a result of Israeli process of ethnic cleansing.
I know that you share this nomination with your wife and partner, Jessie. And I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged her involvement with you. I mean, hand in hand for all these many years. And I know you want to share this nomination with her.
Yeah, she's, as you can see, she's peeling garlic next to me.
Hey, Jessie.
Hey, everyone. Hi, Mike.
So yes, she is obviously an equal partner and have more than equal, actually. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without her. So I think it's important to acknowledge that it should have been nominated with me, but c'est la vie.
When the two of you moved back to Palestine after a career teaching in American universities, you took your retirement and you created the museum and institute at Bethlehem University. I'd like for you to, if you can, go back to those early days and describe for us your and Jesse's vision when you created the museum and the institute.
Well, if we step back and look at the problems here in Palestine, like any other colonial, anti-colonial struggles, it's a difference in vision of the local people, the indigenous people, and the vision of the colonizers. The colonizers, of course, want to reshape the country to look like part of Europe, so they destroy habitats, they destroy nature, and they destroy people and ethnically cleanse people, the indigenous people. And they want to create a European-like country in the middle of an area, a country that is not European, obviously. So the vision of the indigenous people, of course, is to be sustainable on their land, to live in their land. And this is, and to protect their nature, of course. So these two different visions are competing with each other. And so what is my vision as an indigenous person is the same as the vision of a Bedouin in the Negev or a farmer in the Galilee or a fisherman in Jaffa, is that they continue to live on their land when the colonizers want to remove us and destroy us. So the vision of this institute is a vision of sustainable human and natural communities. And this sustainability comes from direct work with the people on the ground on a daily basis to help us sustain ourselves. Sumud, as you heard yesterday on this, Sumud is, when somebody is even planting a tree or planting a weed, a plant, a vegetable, a herb, they are engaged in resistance. So certainly starting this institute is a form of resistance that we have done here in Palestine to allow our people to continue to live in their land and to prosper in their land and to protect their nature at the same time.
So very important. I've always been impressed how you tie together your work in popular resistance as well as your work for ecological justice. Let me follow up with you, Mazin. Every time I visit you, either when I've been by myself or with a group, you have some new initiative, some new project that you're working on. One a number of years ago was aquaponics and aquaculture. Then there was the mobile education unit. There's another a joint project between the Bethlehem Rotary, partnering with a Rotary Club overseas. And then the latest one is the new building up on the hill. So, talk to us about some of the projects that you're working on presently.
Well, there's, of course, the daily activities. I'll give you an example. Today, there were two activities in which our team split. One group of team members were in Atwani in the South Hebron Hills with a mobile educational unit, mobile museum that took knowledge about the environment and sustainability to marginalized people who are threatened by evictions in the South Hebron Hills. The other activity also today happened is a group of children from a school, a Lutheran school in this case, who came here and got to see hyenas that we have rehabilitated. We're about to release them in a couple of weeks. They saw basically an owl that we are rehabilitating. We're also going to release it in a couple of days. We had visitors from abroad and visitors from local communities that came to our institute and talked to us about various things. I got an interview with the Press TV from Iran about the situation in Gaza. And then a French freelance journalist came and interviewed me about issues of ecocide and environmental justice and things like that. And this is just in this one day we had a number of activities and events that are ongoing here. So this is the proximate thing. Longer term things, of course, is that we have projects like, I have projects from National Geographic Society to create a biosphere reserve, the first one in Palestine. Biosphere reserve means that you protect the protected area of nature reserve, but also you protect the people around this. So an area of a community of 8 communities that will be protected. We have project of a seed bank. That's a new project that will be 2 years in the making to make a high quality seed bank. So there's that's that second project, and that's in addition to the projects you mentioned, like the new building, which is 1,350 square meters for a museum of natural history, museum of ethnography, and so on. We have the botanic garden that's growing, and we need to rehabilitate it. We need to make it handicap accessible. We're short on funds, so the only thing that limits us is funds. But generally, we have many ideas, many projects ongoing. We do them as funds and people become available.
You're, of course, always interested and welcoming of people who want to come and volunteer at the Museum and Institute, right?
Yes, absolutely. We provide volunteers with room and board, so you're welcome to come and volunteer here, whatever level of skill or interest you want. In fact, I have another volunteer here listening to our talk, Johnny, sorry. And so we have a lot of possibilities for helping in various areas around the museum, whether it's in the garden, the kitchen, and in the museum itself, and the exhibits with the children, etc.
In May, when my group and I will be visiting you, you'll be taking us to the local village of Batir. Batir is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's recently declared Batir in danger after finding that the landscape had become vulnerable under impact of sociocultural and geopolitical transformations that could bring irreversible damage to its authenticity and integrity. That's from UNESCO. So, in other words, ecologically under siege by the Israelis, settlers, and others. So, I want you to take a minute or two, take a few minutes, and talk to us about Batir and why it's in danger and why it's an example of environmental injustice and ecological devastation caused by the Zionist occupation of the West Bank.
Yes, when Israel was created in 1948, this state created displacement of over 530 Palestinian villages and towns. That's most of the Palestinian population was removed that is currently in the area that became known as the State of Israel in 1948-49. In 1967, Israel occupied the rest of Palestine, 22% of historic Palestine, and proceeded to do the same thing, ethnic cleansing, etc. Now, there's a cluster of villages to the west of Bethlehem area where I'm speaking to you from, where Jesus was born, to the southwest of Jerusalem, basically. And this cluster of villages, it's called the Al-Arqub villages. They include places like Al-Walaja and Batir. These are areas targeted for ethnic cleansing, basically, and for pressuring the population to leave. Al-Walaja, for example, actually is only in a village that's built on about 1/3 of the original land of Al-Walaja, or 1/4 of the original land of Al-Walaja. Most of Al-Walaja land was taken in 1948. In 1967, when Israel occupied this area, they proceeded to take more land from Al-Walaja, and basically what's left of Al-Walaja is about 10% of the land of Al-Walaja, surrounded by a wall. This is the reality of the village. Al-Walaja sits across from Batir. Batir historically is an important village, as you mentioned. We designate, it's not Batir actually, that we designate as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It was an area around Batir, which includes parts of Al-Walaja and others, for the landscape quality as an area of importance historically for humanity, because these areas with the terraces and the old olive trees, some of them 3,000-4,000-year-old olive trees. One tree in Al-Walaja is estimated at being 4,000 years old. But anyways, the destruction of this ancient landscape caused us, and I was involved in this with some Italian and French groups, to work to designate it as a UNESCO World Heritage Site so that we protect it from further encroachment by the Zionists. This didn't quite work out like we hoped to, maybe delayed their work a little bit, but now they are building settlements on the lands of Batir and Al-Walaja and Hussan and Nahalin and other villages that are to the west of Bethlehem.
In addition to your activism, Mazin, you, along with your students, visiting scholars, and others, publish research papers and scholarly articles about the conservation of at-risk biodiversity and the flora and fauna of Palestine. Do you want to share with us 2 or 3 of your most recent articles and how they benefit not only the local community, but they add to the scholarship about Palestinian conservation?
Yes, we are at the Bethlehem University Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. are, of course, interested in research, education, conservation, and community service. Research comes number one because you cannot really do conservation or education if you don't do good research. So we do research on various areas. The research that we do is basically applied research. So applied meaning that it's useful for society in demonstration of what needs to be done and then how to proceed to do it. So this is the idea of research, and it evolves. It's not constant in a particular field. So for example, let's take the recent genocidal war in Gaza that started in October 2023. Our research shifted to be applied to areas in Gaza, like the effect of wars, climate changes, justice issues relating to the Gaza population. And that's what we have done in the past year and almost a year and a half now. And this is what we do. We are working on this. We published a paper in the International Journal of Environmental Studies that basically catalogs all the impact of wars on things like climate change, like habitat destruction, things like depleted uranium and white phosphorus and so on that they tossed on us. We recently did a paper, just published actually only 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, that relates to the damage to agricultural fields in Gaza. And that includes like the tree covers, olive trees, palm trees, etc. in Gaza, and also the destruction to greenhouses in Gaza. And the study used remote sensing. It was in collaboration with 4 other researchers who know more about remote sensing than I do. One from Sweden, one from Canada, and the US and England. So 5 countries in total, 5 authors from 5 countries, published in a journal of remote sensing, where we actually cataloged almost every single tree field in Gaza and how it was impacted. In North Gaza, 94% of the tree cover is gone. Most of the greenhouses, except 3 greenhouses, are gone by the end of September 2024, when we did the study for 1 year period, basically, from October 23 to September 24. So this is what we do. These are just 2 examples of the papers we have done recently relating to Gaza. And we are working now on papers relating to restoration, soil reclamation, habitat reclamation, to prepare for the time when we hope that they will allow us into Gaza to do these things.
You know, I'm often asked, what is it about Gaza that Israel wants so badly? And of course, you know, there's the access to the Mediterranean and all of that, you know, the beachfront that you hear about from Trump and all of that. But there's the oil reserves too, right? And so it's the oil reserves and even more. What is it about Gaza that is so that Israel wants so badly? And talk about the oil reserves too, right offshore.
It's not oil per se, it's gas fields.
Gas fields, that's right.
And the gas fields were discovered about 20 years ago. Coincidental, by the way, with the applying of the blockade and siege on Gaza. Not so coincident if you want to think about it. Why does Israel prevent fishermen from Gaza and going more than 6 nautical miles into the sea? Is because at 7 nautical miles into the sea, they get the gas fields.
Yeah.
The gas fields are estimated to hold at least $55 billion worth of gas and perhaps as much as $250 billion. So There is a lot of work that Israel is doing to extract gas from the fields in Gaza. This is one interest. A second interest, as you pointed out, is the coastal area is very important. The western aquifer that Israel polluted and destroyed, western water aquifer, is largely under the Gaza Strip. The third thing is what Israel has always been planning, which is to finish off the Palestinian struggle, get rid of all the Palestinians, have a greater Israel which stretches from the Nile to the Euphrates, and be the conduit, the connection between Europe and Asia, an alternative to the Silk Road Initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative that China has spent so much money and resources and manpower to create, connecting China to Europe through countries like Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Syria and Turkey. That's why, by the way, these countries are also being targeted now in this genocide. Sorry if I'm going too long, but this is...
No, no, I'm glad you did. Yeah, of course it's gas reserves. I knew that. I just, I misspoke. Let's shift gears a little bit, Mazin, just yourself as an analyst. For the last year and a half, of course, the goal of Israel in this so-called so-called war on Gaza. Of course, it's more than a war on Gaza, right? It's a war on the very idea of Palestine. I always say it's an effort to wipe Palestine from human memory. But it's now, it's always been in the West Bank too, right? And of course, while our eyes are focused on Gaza, there's this genocide and ethnic cleansing that's occurring now in Jenin and Nablus and Hebron and throughout the incursions into the Ida refugee camp, which is closer to home for you. Talk to us about this ethnic cleansing and genocide in the West Bank as well.
Yes, indeed, you know, most people are focusing on what's happening in Gaza, and this is part of the reason why Israel is feeling free to do what it wants in the West Bank, which is what it's always wanted to do, which is to remove local people from the West Bank and have it part of this larger, greater Israel project, if you want. So they usually start for some reason in the north and go south. That's what they did in the Gaza Strip. They started in North Gaza and then went down to Rafah area in the south in their destruction. So they're starting in the north of the West Bank, primarily in cities like Jenin, Nablus, and Tulkarem. And they focused first on the refugee camps in those cities, although they're now expanding beyond the refugee camps. They're ethnically cleansing the refugee camps and destroying the refugee camps in those areas, just like they did in Gaza. I mean, they started Jabalia refugee camp, and then they went on to Jabalia city itself. We have many refugees. We have 19 refugee camps in the West Bank, by the way. So anyways, the refugee camps in Nablus, Jenin, and Tulkarem refugee camp, for example, is called Nur Shams, and it's been targeted heavily by the Israeli occupants, killing people, women, even children, and destroying homes and infrastructure. They go with these D9, American D9 Caterpillar bulldozers that the company Caterpillar only makes for Israel. They don't make them for anybody else. These are huge bulldozers that can knock a building with one push. They also have attached to them devices that allow you to uproot a street, for example, destroy a street with one sweep moving across the street. So that's what they've been doing there in Gaza, and they started doing it in the West Bank. And our turn in Bethlehem is coming, of course. As I said, they start in the north, they come down to the south. In the Bethlehem area, we have 3 refugee camps. They already started incursions in these refugee camps. But yesterday, even the soldiers were in front of a Church of Nativity. I don't know what they were doing there, but they were walking around as if there's nothing, literally in front of a Church of Nativity, which has been almost shuttered because, as you know, there's no tourists for the past year and a half, almost since the war in Gaza. So this is the reality of what we have to face. And over 33 Palestinian communities in the West Bank were already destroyed, and especially Bedouin communities in the Jordan Valley, villagers in the Jordan Valley, and villagers and areas in the South Hebron Hills, among others.
Let me follow up. Let me follow up with that, Mazin. As we gather here today, the Israeli government has openly said that it's violating its agreement with Hamas and won't enter stage 2 of the ceasefire unless. All of this with the not only tacit but spoken approval and criminal complicity of the United States. You know the U.S. very well. You spent a lot of time here during your teaching career. We all have, each one of us have our opinions about why this is, but tell us, in your opinion, Mazin, what is it about the U.S. that is so absolutist in its support of Israel, even now during this genocide? And for over, what, 76 years and longer?
Well, actually, yeah, much longer.
The Zionist agenda,
Zionist agenda, which started in the 19th century, as you know, with people like Pinsker and then later Herzl and so on in the 19th century, was foisted in the US initially via trying to convince Christians and Jews that Zionism is good for them. And so they sent, the British Empire sent this guy Schofield with the Schofield Bible that misinterprets the Bible with comments that is related to connecting the New Testament to the Old Testament, but also to talk to Jewish Americans in the late 19th century. In fact, the early Zionists visited the United States and lobbied successfully in the late 19th century. And then came the Balfour Declaration, which was a British declaration, 1917, in support of Zionism. And Congress passed a resolution in support of the Balfour Declaration. The president of the US at the time also supported this declaration to establish to change a country, basically against the will of the people of the country, to change the country from multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and multilingual society to make it the Jewish state of Israel. This was the origin of this, and it continues to this day through the lobbies, which grew stronger and stronger, especially after 1967. But really starting 1957, the year I was born, when AIPAC was formed. AIPAC was formed in 1957 because they felt Eisenhower 1956 was not sufficiently pro-Israel and had even asked the Israelis to withdraw from the Sinai. So they established AIPAC. And then, of course, when John F. Kennedy came to power, he tried to make AIPAC register as a foreign lobby, and he almost succeeded in it, but then his life was cut short, as you know. So then things accelerated in terms of the power of the lobby in Washington and throughout the United States. This is the main reason for the U.S. supporting Israel, even against U.S. best interests, U.S. economic interests, U.S. social interests, U.S. interests in the world, all suffer because of this support for this rogue apartheid genocidal state.
You know, just to punctuate that, I've often said that white Christian nationalism is to Christianity as Zionism is to Judaism. Aren't we seeing that ethnic cleansing and genocide are the natural outgrowth of both of these triumphalist, exceptionalist, racist ideologies? I mean, Christian nationalism and Zionism both.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead.
It goes back to other phenomena that came from the West, like Nazism and Crusaderism. Crusaderism is another ideology that was racist and made the streets of Jerusalem, which is only 5 miles away from where I am, the streets of Jerusalem was flowing in blood. What does this have to do with Christianity? You know, is this about Christianity? It had to do with political racist ideologies that were foisted on common people. You know, especially when you have problems like with Crusaderism because of the Middle Ages in Europe. Of course, Europe was with the plague and everything else. Life was very tough. So the politicians can capitalize on tough life and blame somebody else, in this case, blame Muslims, for example, and so that's how they did it, and the same thing with Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists and others. I mean, I don't like to use these terminologies, by the way, Christian Zionism, because to me, that's an oxymoron. You cannot be a Christian and a Zionist at the same time. But anyways, that's the terminology that people use. So it's clear that this is harmful also to the people that perpetuate this. Eventually, the Crusaders did not succeed, and they lasted here 140 years. They did a lot of damage. It didn't help Europe come out of the Middle Ages. It was Renaissance actually came because of science and knowledge, and actually even Arabic and Islamic science and knowledge that was transferred to the West, you know. So it's sometimes, you know, people don't realize what they are being duped to do.
One of the things that many folks might miss, Mazin, is that you're the author of one of the most important books on the history of Palestinian resistance, and it's one that I recommend to our folks who come on these solidarity tours with me. Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment. There you go. Thanks. You just happen to have it right there on your desk.
I also have my book, Mammals of the Holy Land, if you all want.
Well, the Popular Resistance book is one that really was important to me. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about it, if you don't mind. Give us examples of how your work in environmental justice and sustainable agriculture is part of your long-standing commitment to popular resistance.
Again, I'm trying to think how to be short in this, because I could speak for an hour just on this topic. You know, the book actually just summarizes the history of Palestinian resistance going back from the 19th century when we had our first uprising in 1880, and then all the 15 other uprisings, 14 by the time I wrote the book. Now the Gaza ghetto uprising is number 15, by the way. So we had those waves of uprisings, etc. Now, what's the relationship from what we do here in this institute and popular resistance in Palestine and liberation? I think obviously, as I said earlier, everything we do is resistance. When I'm drinking this cup of tea here, by the way, that's a form of resistance, because the Zionists don't want me to be drinking tea here. They would be happy if I'm drinking tea in America, somewhere else. Go get the hell out of their country, as they consider it, that they want it a Jewish country. They don't want non-Jews like my family is Christian, or many of the people I work with are Muslims or Baha'i or Druze or whatever. They want a Jewish state, period, end of story. So everything we do here, when I give classes at the university, at Bethlehem University, that's a form of resistance. When I'm teaching students, when we had those kids I mentioned to you earlier who were here today, children from a Lutheran school, they came, they got educated about the environment. That's a form of resistance. When I see the lights in their eyes about how important it is to protect plants, protect animals, this is a form of resistance.
This is the question I've been trying to lead up to, and it has to do with your book, Popular Resistance. So, and it's, as you mentioned in your book, it's rather nuanced. So you're being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. You are active in the popular resistance movement in Palestine. Yet in your book, when you talk about the history of popular resistance in Palestine, you give a number of examples where this popular resistance is complex. It is both the nonviolent struggle along with an armed struggle. I mean, it's complex on the ground, and you've given a number of examples about that in your book. Popular resistance doesn't happen in a vacuum, in other words. So talk to us about the nonviolent struggle, but that it's part of this overall complexity of a popular struggle, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word complex or complexity. I think it's a matter of looking at it objectively as any colonial, anti-colonial struggles. And for you all in North America, for example, if you think about the European colonization in North America and the resistance to it, there was a spectrum of resistance. There were people who resisted verbally, there were people who objected, there were people who fought. It's natural in colonial, anti-colonial struggles to have a spectrum of resistance. And in fact, I do not know of any colonial, anti-colonial struggle that was composed of one form of struggle only, or another form of struggle. They all include all forms of resistance. And that's natural. Why? Because different people have different ways of resisting. In fact, if you take a group of dogs and start one by one putting them in a corner, poking them with a stick, and different dogs behave differently. Some of them will bark at you, some of them will whine, some of them will, if it's a bulldog, might rip your neck off, So different people behave differently under situations of oppression. And that is natural for humans as it is for any other animal or any other living being. So this is what we have, and that's what you expect to have. And wishful thinking is not something that I engage in. I engage in activism. I know what I want to do, and you heard Isa tell you the same thing yesterday. I know what I was inspired by. You asked me earlier about what I was inspired by. After my travel to the US and in my university years, both at Jordan University and at American universities, I learned about other struggles and the struggles of people like Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, etc. That is the struggle I was inspired by, and that guides me as a person. But I am not in a position of judging other people and how they struggle. And there is no, by the way, dichotomy between violent and non-violent struggle. That's why there is no, Mahatma Gandhi refused to use these terminologies, for example.
Right.
He talked about his resistance as satyagraha and ahimsa and things like that, which are positive kind of denotation of what he had done. And so, but even if you want to use terms like nonviolent resistance, is economic sabotage of a railroad that's carrying weapons to kill civilians, is that violent or non-violent resistance? Well, different people may have different perspectives on this point. Is throwing a stone at an Israeli tank by a child who's 13 years old, is that violent or non-violent resistance? So different perspectives from different people on these questions. That's why I don't like dichotomies. I like to think there's a spectrum of hundreds of forms of resistance. Different people engage in different forms of resistance.
I asked this of every one of my Palestinian friends because it's important that we in the West, who are sitting in our comfortable homes, and it's important that we hear from people who are facing genocide, right? And far be it from us to judge the way oppressed people might react or might resist. And so it was important that I get your views on that, Mazin. Thank you. I want to return to a couple of different areas, different peoples who are under siege, and get your take on them. The first one is Masafer Yatta and the people there. Can you tell us what's going on today there? And I asked this of Isa yesterday, but I want to get your take on what's going on there and just to give us an update.
Yeah, there's actually a new documentary that was released. Probably you all heard about it. No Other Land, that documents what's happening in Masafer Yatta.
I was just going to ask you about your evaluation of that film since it won the Academy Award, but continue, please.
Won the what do you call them? The
Oscar
Academy Awards. Yeah, and this is very, very significant for a Palestinian and an Israeli co-directors to win an Oscar. So that's very good. But anyway, the film documents what's happening as of that date. The relatives of the Palestinian director, by the way, have just been attacked only a couple of days ago in Masafer Yatta, and destroying their shacks and rummaging through their furniture, etc. So it's kind of tough. Masafer Yatta is in the south of the West Bank, close to the border of the Green Line, what's called the border. It's not really a border, it's a ceasefire line of 1949. But because they are in that area that's coveted by the Israelis, they did everything to cleanse the area, as they did with many other areas of the local inhabitants. So one of the things they did in that area is first, in the 1970s, they declared it a nature reserve, ironically. Who declares it a nature reserve? It was the Jewish National Fund. How many biologists or environmentalists does the Jewish National Fund have employed to declare these nature reserves? Zero biologists or environmentalists. So the declaration of as a nature reserve is intended to exclude the native people, to prevent them from, pastoral life of sheep and goats, etc. And then they declared most of this quote-unquote nature reserve, they declared it as military training zone 918. That's what they call it, military training zone 918. They must have had 917 other places to train their military. But anyway, they come in there with military tanks and and with helicopters, and they bombed the shit out of the place. They practiced for going to Gaza right there on the people of South Hebron Hills, were subjected to random fire if they are in the area that's being targeted at that time. This is what's happening. They prevent them from building, so many of them live in caves. And when they build like a shack or something, they come and destroy it, claiming it was built without a permit. Like in Qumsiyeh and other places, Palestinian communities. And in the meantime, right in the middle of the so-called nature reserve slash military training zone 918, they established Israeli settlements like Qumsiyeh, as they called it by the Arabic name Qumsiyeh. Aramaic, actually, it's an original name of the area. And so this Qumsiyeh colonial settlement is inhabited by South African whites who came here, by the way, after the collapse of apartheid in South Africa, because they wanted to continue the racist way of life. A la Elon Musk, if you want, you know, he made the Nazi salute.
Yeah.
He's a racist. He's been known as a racist for a long time from South Africa. So these people from South Africa, who are not Jewish, by the way, they went to the Israeli embassy after the collapse of apartheid, and they said, we want to go become Israeli citizens. They asked them, well, are you Jewish? They said, no. I said, well, you can't become Israeli citizens if you are not Jewish. So they said, well, it's no problem, make us Jewish. Well, what does it take? So they assigned the rabbi to them, 200 plus citizens of South Africa, converted to Judaism, went to the South Hebron Hills. They actually selected to go to the South Hebron Hills because it's isolated, because there are Palestinians there. And what they do every weekend, those radical South Africans, speaking Afrikaner, they go hunting Palestinians like they were hunting black Zulu South Africans. And now as Jews, of course, not as Christians, supposedly. Although I don't know if they believe in God or anything else, but that's what they do.
Let me thank you for that horrible description, but thank you. It's important that we hear that. I know that you, well, let me say it this way. Whenever I bring my groups, we go to Khan al-Amr, the Bedouin encampment on the road between Jericho and Jerusalem. Talk to us about the threat under which the Bedouin communities around the West Bank are living.
Well, this goes back to a plan drafted in 1968, right after Israel occupied these areas of the West Bank. And the idea of this plan, there was a commission created by the Israeli government, headed by a general who is considered a war hero, if you want. And this plan is called the Alon Plan, after this general who led the plan. The plan was, here we occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and the Golan Heights and the Sinai. Tell us what you think we should do with this. This is a commission. How are we going to deal with it? And Alon and his team came up with a brilliant plan that since, like most countries, if you look at the US, for example, if you look even at New England, most of the population live on less than 3% of the land or 4% of the land in urban areas, etc., in cities, stuff like that. The majority of the land has few people in it, farmers, etc., Bedouins, in our case. In the case of the US, farmers. So his plan was we let the Palestinians live in the urban areas, continue to live in the urban areas, and we take all the open areas and develop them and get rid of the Palestinians in those areas.
Yeah.
This is the area, the Alone Plan 1968, which was codified in the Oslo Accords with the areas called ABC areas, where A areas are the Palestinian urban areas like Bethlehem here, and so on. The Area C is most of the West Bank, and that's under Israeli control, and people are being ethnically cleansed from it, whether it's in Khan al-Ahmar area in the mountains here in the hills from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea, or the South Hebron Hills that we talked about. Those are areas to be ethnically cleansed of their people. So that's the suffering of the Bedouins. The Bedouins of Khan al-Ahmar actually were moved already twice. First, they were in the Negev. They were pushed out of the Negev in 1948 to the Jordan Valley. And then when Israel occupied the Jordan Valley, part of the West Bank, in 1967, they kicked them out of the Jordan Valley to come uphill to semi-arid desert regions, if you want, near the settlement of Ma'ala Adumim that was established later, and now Ma'ala Adumim was established and is growing, so they want them out of there. So that's why it's going to be a third ethnic cleansing for these people.
Yeah, and now they're under a demolition order of even these tin shacks, and their school made out of tires and some plaster. They're under threat to be moved to this garbage dump closer in on the outskirts of Jerusalem. Let me shift gears, Mazin, again. I always say, I know there are others, but I always say that Ireland and South Africa lead the world in their support of Palestine. And again, I know that there are other countries too. Talk to us about the court cases brought by South Africa, the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. The entire framework of international law seems to be on the side of Palestine, yet things continue to get worse. So on the one hand, these rulings, right? These rulings are important by the UN and by these courts in these resolutions. And on the other hand, they seem to be ineffectual. But talk to us about what's happening with the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. How do you see those?
I mean, I see them as important for information dissemination and for explaining the hypocrisy of the Western world, you know, that the Western world, after the Second World War, and thanks to the horrors of what happened in the Second World War and the rules of war that existed before 1945, which was might makes right, basically, League of Nations having failed to regulate wars like they are supposed to. So they created the United Nations and these instruments like the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, supposedly to prevent might makes right things. But it turns out the system is rigged, of course, and the system is rigged with the 5 major powers, the US being one of them that's most abusing the system, that protects itself and protects its client states and others, its partners from international law, because they have a veto power and at the UN Security Council. And the UN Security Council is the only one that can actually impose sanctions on countries. So the UN Security Council will never impose a sanction on the state of Israel. Like they won't impose sanctions on the US, obviously, because there's a veto power the US has at the UN Security Council. So it really does not matter. So it's not going to be helpful.
I want to there's been a lot of comments in the chat room, but I want to, a couple of them have questions just for you. So I want to just, for the head of ICAD in the UK, Linda Ramsden asks, please confirm that it was Basil Adra's parents who were attacked this week by the settlers, and what was destroyed.
I'm not sure how they are related to Basil Adra. I think it is his family, his immediate family. Yes.
Okay. And
I
then
don't.
Margaret Kennedy says that she's part of I think it's Massachusetts Peace Action. They just had an event, and she's asking if you'd be interested in helping us with part 2 of their series. They're looking for speakers. What I will do, Margaret, and what I will do, Mazin, is I will email this, Margaret. I will email what you put in the chat room. I will email that to Mazin as soon as we're done today, okay? So that way he has that. So
Yeah,
let
I'm
me
also putting, I just put my email in the chat room. You can email me at mazin@qumsiyeh.org or info@palestinenature.org, and I'll put both in the chat room. If you're not on our email list, write to me so that I can add you to our weekly email list.
Okay, good. So Margaret, if you take a look, you see his email in the chat, so I don't have to get involved with this. You can write Mazin directly. Thank you. Thanks, Margaret, and thank you, Mazin. I just have a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. This nomination, Mazin, for the Nobel Peace Prize, so important, can give you even a broader platform to further your work. Have you given any thought to how this might be helpful to advance the work, your work, and the work of the center and the Institute?
Well, it's hard to gauge, but since the university decided, Bethlehem University decided to use this nomination and seek support, we did get a few $1,000s of donations directly connected to this. So we are very grateful for that. Of course, we still need a lot more. As I said, we're building this new facility and we are short significant amounts of money for it. So every bit helps. If any of you know people who can donate, we would appreciate it. So it helps in terms of donations. It helps in terms of visibility also. Obviously, I mean, I received a couple of other awards, actually, like the Firebrand Award and others, the Peace Seeker of the Year Award. But I would say that it's the publicity is always helpful to bring attention to Palestine. I don't need attentions or accolade to me personally. You know, I published 230 scientific papers and I have many books, and a lot of people know me. I have 60-some thousand people on my email list. So you know, personally, I don't care. And also my name, it's not a matter of, I didn't choose my name. It was given to me by my family. So it's not my choice. So I don't care that my name is remembered, but I do care that people help Palestine. And if the visibility around this helps bring support to Palestine. When I went to Australia and New Zealand with Jesse last year, we actually raised a lot of money for Gaza, not for the Institute here or for us. And we actually spent some of our own money to go to Australia and New Zealand. So raising a lot of money for Gaza Strip, for the Institute, for Bethlehem University, to me, this is important. Raising awareness of people, that's important, because then they become activists, and we need activists. We need activists. When you have a genocide and ecocide going on, you really need many, many more activists to change this titanic around, because the world is heading for a catastrophe, whether it's for climate change or global nuclear war or any of these things. So if we don't get our act together, we are in trouble.
I would also encourage all of you, if you don't receive Mazin's mailings, please email him and ask to get his mailings. They're a wealth of information and inspiration and challenge on a regular basis, and so we're grateful for that, Mazin. You end each one of your mailings by urging your readers to quote, "Stay humane." It used to be "stay human." Now it's "stay humane and keep the faith." And then you sign your name and call yourself a Bedouin in cyberspace, a villager at home. Tell us about that.
Well, stay human actually is first used in emails by our friend Vittorio Arrigoni, who was in Gaza. He was killed in Gaza, actually, I think by Jordanian intelligence on the behest of the Israelis, but that's another story. But anyway, Vittorio used to end, of course, in Italian. He would write "stay human." And after he was killed, I started using it because I knew him. And so I've been using it for many years. Then somebody told me, well, humans are not necessarily very nice species. So I added humane, to make it a little bit more about the actual action of being humanity, being kind to other people. As far as the other signage on my email list, Bedouin in cyberspace, a villager at home. I'm actually a villager. Even today, I was down in the garden weeding, and yesterday we were in the field. We collected some orchids, brought them here for conservation purposes. So I planted them. I have a small plot that I plant in our community garden. So I'm an actual villager. My grandparents are villagers on my father's side, and all my ancestors are villagers. So a Bedouin in cyberspace because, as you see, I'm roaming, moving. And here I am speaking to you. Where are you? By the way, I don't remember.
A very full, and after a very full day. Well,
Yeah.
folks, I want to give Mazin the last word, but before I do, I just want to remind you that a recording of this interview, as well as yesterday's webinar with Isa Amro and Jeff Halper, will be posted on our Indiana Center for Middle East Peace YouTube channel in a couple of days. I also, on behalf of all the gang here gathered, Mazin, many of whom are your friends and who've been at the Institute and the museum, we want to just say how grateful we are to you, how proud we are to be your friends, and how much we wish you well with this nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I also want to acknowledge that the people on this call, each one of them in their own rights, are active in their various communities on behalf of justice more broadly and on behalf of justice for Palestine. So Mazin, any closing thoughts for us today?
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know what to say other than we are in a pivotal. We're both lucky and unlucky in being in this period in human history where an empire is collapsing. The Western empires in general are collapsing, and where new world order is being created. But unlike the previous collapses and rising of empires and other powers, we are at a very precarious situation because of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, satellites that can obliterate whole cities, etc. So I'm not sure we're going to just switch from one empire to another. I think we are either going to create a world order in which all countries are respected, all people are respected, especially the people of the global South, who suffered so much thanks to European colonization,
Yeah.
and people like Native Americans and blacks in the US, etc., where we either have that justice, that equality, that good future for all, that win-win situation, if you want, or the alternative is we go extinct and cockroaches will take over the planet because they are resistant to nuclear radiation. So as a biologist, I say maybe humans have had their chance. Maybe it's not a bad idea. No, but that's joking, you know. Obviously, as a human being, I want our species to succeed, and I want our species to do well, and I want nature to be protected. And I think all of you want the same thing. And so I urge you to, you are involved already, just keep spreading the word, keep the faith strong, keep pushing. We are not losing, you know, we are winning. Already this empire is collapsing. Look at the stock market in the US. Look at what's happening. It's going to collapse. The debt in the US is now, just in the first 6 months of the fiscal year, government deficit is $1 trillion. So over the year, it will be $2 trillion, and Trump wants to cut taxes. This will only taxes for the wealthy, of course, not for the common working people. So what will this do? It will accelerate the demise of the empire. And good riddance, by the way. The US empire is the worst empire in human history in terms of number of people that were killed thanks to it. So it's really important that we all get involved. We try to save, and I love the US. I consider it my second home. It's, you know, I have US citizenship, and I say the people of the US need to get education, need to move. And what you are doing, Michael, and all the people here, they are doing their best to ensure a smooth demise of this empire, not a violent demise of this empire.
Well, we return to the mission, right, of the museum and the institute, and that is a sustainable future for humanity as well as for all animal and plant life, a sustainable future for the planet. And Mazin Qumsiyeh and Jesse Qumsiyeh, thank you very much. Congratulations on your nomination. And we'll see you, many of us will see you in Bethlehem in the next year or so. Thank you, Mazin.